what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, October 4th, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting at long, slow glide down to Pauha on a Friday, and whatever insanity lies in store for us there. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And a quick little program note, sometime during our third hour, we're expecting a phone call from Regina Imburgia, who's very much involved in the renewed push to ban water fluoridation in the wake of that 12-year study that showed drinking fluoridated water lowers your IQ. And all I can imagine is they must be dumping a ton of that stuff into the water supply in Washington, D.C. So we're looking forward to having her come on there. Right now, Donald Trump is out there in Las Vegas. They're still milking this thing for all the bathos they can. And everybody's speechifying and just basically pounding on this thing as hard as they can. But there remain some unanswered questions about the Las Vegas shooting where it's still not really making a lot of sense. And they're out there coming out with all this other stuff about, well, he got radicalized, he was this, he converted to Islam, he was joining Antifa, his girlfriend was doing all these nefarious things. Remember, his father was crazy, and they're trying to reinforce this idea that this 64-year-old guy got all those guns into that room without being detected and then fired off all those rounds at the people. And there are a couple of things. They're starting to release the crime scene pictures, including one of Paddock himself, who has been clearly shot in the mouth. Whether he did it himself or not, we don't know. But there are a couple of things that really stood out to me in those photos. First of all, in the photo over toward the so-called sniper's nest, there are two chairs that are pushed together, and a whole bunch of the guns are just dumped on them. Now, if you know anything about gun enthusiasts, they treat those guns very carefully. Gun cases, so forth and so on. They wouldn't just bang them all together in an arm load because of the possibility of breaking or knocking out of alignment key components like the sights or breaking off little tiny tabs that control the function of the weapons. And you wouldn't want to untangle them in the heat of your shooting. So you would lay them out one by one, side by side, where they could be grabbed. And the other thing that really kind of stood out, and a lot of people have noticed this, there are a few brass casings on the floor, but nowhere near what you would expect from the volume of gunfire captured on all these videos that were made on all of these cell phones. So everybody's asking, where's the brass? And these guns do not have what are called brass catchers. As a matter of fact, most shooters do not like those because as you fire, the gun gets heavier and heavier because it's capturing all the expended ammo, and it tends to pull off to one side. So, again, there is an insufficient amount of brass. The way the guns are just dumped on the chair, it looks like somebody was dressing a set rather than a real gun enthusiast going on in and taking care of his weapons and so forth and so on. So a lot of really odd things going on about all of this stuff. And a lot of people are very suspicious, and they have a right to be, if for no other reason that we have been lied to so many times about so many things by this government and the corporate media. Now, not too surprisingly, celebrities, always in love with their own image, are ramping up their attacks on gun owners. Oh, it's those gosh darn gun owners. Guns are bad, guns are bad. And what's really amazing is how many of these celebrities made their fame and fortune in movies showing huge amounts of gun violence. They're just shooting everything in sight. And again, when a Muslim commits an act of terror, the government and the corporate media just try and remind us that we should not blame all Muslims for the actions of a single individual. Well, why can't gun owners get the same deal? Because when a shooter commits an act of violence, that same government blames all gun owners for it, says we should take away all the guns. Now, the reality is in this country, more people are killed with baseball bats than assault rifles. Are we going to ban baseball because of those murders? I mean, baseball doesn't really have a useful purpose. I got some emails saying, well, you can't ban cars. Cars are necessary. Cars are useful. Well, to a gun enthusiast, guns are useful, chasing criminals out of your home and so forth and so on. All right, so I put it into the context of baseball. Baseball doesn't really serve any purpose. It's fun. So is shooting at targets. Are we going to ban all baseball because some people will use a bat to crush the head of people they don't like? It doesn't really make any sense, does it? Now, earlier in the week, it was reported that there was no history of mental illness in Stephen Paddock and no prescription antidepressants. And now apparently they found that last June he was given a prescription for diazepam, and they're trying to make a big deal. Oh, it's a dangerous psychoactive drug. This is what flipped him out and everything. And as much as the link between prescription antidepressants and violence is an area I focus on, I don't think this is really a factor in this case. Now, diazepam used to be called Valium. It's made from the valerian root, which you can actually buy without a prescription at your local health food store. It's a calmative. He was prescribed this to deal with anxiety. And I did some research over at ssristories.com. Valium is not high on the list of drugs linked to violence. And the documented cases where it was a factor all involve the fact that Valium will lower your inhibitions, meaning a person who is already naturally violent will be more likely to carry out an act of violence. But those acts tend to be spontaneous, spur of the moment, not planned out well in advance. And Stephen Paddock, while verbally abusive toward his girlfriend when drunk, has no history of violent behavior. So I don't think this is the factor everyone's trying to make it out to be here. Believe it or not, the FBI still has not contacted Eric Paddock, Stephen Paddock's brother, who was already all over the media saying this is just not him. This is not what he's like. He's not a shooter. He's not strongly political. He's not strongly religious. He's just a guy. He hung out. He flew planes. He hunted occasionally. Mostly he gambled. That's what he did. He liked hanging out in the casinos and gambling. And they're trying to make a big deal about the huge amounts of money that he wagered. Well, he was a multimillionaire, so he's a high roller, which is why the casinos all love him. But the casinos are refusing to say whether the numbers that have been quoted so far represent losses or if they were, in fact, winnings. Apparently, at one time, he actually won $40,000 on a single pull of a slot machine. Sounds like a very lucky guy. But the FBI still isn't talking to this guy. They're not talking to anybody that isn't going to support the narrative. And now we're hearing from an article on 12160 that apparently the Mandalay Bay Hotel has deleted all records of Stephen Paddock's reservations, including who he might have had in the rooms with him. And apparently he did have somebody in the room with him a few days before the shooting because he ordered room service for two. Now, maybe it was his girlfriend. I don't have a timeline on when she left the country. But they're digging at all this stuff, trying to find some way to maintain that narrative that this guy acted on his own. He's a white male, lone wolf, radicalized terrorist. He doesn't fit the pattern. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. Interesting little article coming out of Russia Insider. Our banner of deceit is leading our country to failure. And they mean this one, the United States of America. And basically they're saying a reputation for telling the truth can only be lost once. And from then on, the use of the phrase U.S. intelligence sources becomes synonymous with a conspiracy of barefaced liars. We know the U.S. intelligence agencies lie. They lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We know the CIA lied to Donald Trump when they claimed they had hard evidence that Assad gassed the people at Idlib, even though the story didn't make any sense on the face of it. Whatever message Washington and the corporate media are pushing, a perfectly valid response is to point out all the times they've lied in the past, which we do here. And then you follow it up with a simple question. When do you think the U.S. government and the corporate media stopped lying? When did they all of a sudden grow a conscience? When did they all of a sudden decide maybe we ought to be telling the truth to the American people? And apparently Sheriff Lombardo is out there saying the Las Vegas shooter was radicalized. And again, there was no indication of it from his friends and family. People don't get radicalized and keep it totally internal. They're going to be talking to people about their new revelations, their new higher understanding about what's going on. It doesn't happen in a vacuum here. Now, some very bizarre things are happening politically in the wake of the Las Vegas shooting. Apparently, Democratic Representative Al Green from Texas got up in the House of Representatives and said that the plan to impeach Donald Trump is postponed in the wake of the Vegas shooting, which sounds like they can't find anything to impeach Trump for, which they can't, and they're hoping that Mueller is going to find something to indict Donald Trump on, which would make impeachment a lot easier. But right now they can't move forward, and they're admitting that, and they're using the Las Vegas shooting as an excuse for that. Now, there are a lot of stories about heroes and heroism coming on out from Las Vegas. This one really, I think, shows that these kind of disasters really do bring out the best in the American people. Good old boys, country western fans and everything. Ex-Marine Taylor Winston, 29 years old, found a truck with the keys still inside, and he just took it to drive victims to the hospital. He took 30 people to the hospital. When the owner of the truck found out, all he said was, "That's cool, give me back the keys." I think that's absolutely the perfect response. So, anyway. Okay, apparently they're questioning Stephen Paddock's girlfriend, try and get her to say something that will incriminate him. All right, here we go. President Trump, as you know, went down to Puerto Rico earlier this week, helped hand out food. Everybody there was applauding him. They think he's doing a great job, which yanked the rug out from underneath the corporate media's spin that Trump was kind of neglecting Puerto Rico. And apparently that mayor of San Juan was trying to push that agenda as well, and it didn't work here. And now President Trump is saying that maybe it's time to think about simply writing off Puerto Rico's $74 billion debt, which Goldman Sachs is not going to be happy about. But there's a compelling body of evidence that Puerto Rico, like Greece, like Cyprus, like most of Europe, and even the United States of America, that their extreme debt is engineered by the banks to maximize their profits. And I think zeroing out Puerto Rico's debt is about the only reasonable thing to do after everything that they have suffered. Put them back on a zero basis and let them start all over again. Reset the system. Instead of every penny that they make going back out to the bankers, now they can start to rebuild their island, rebuild industry, rebuild tourism. Puerto Rico's a nice place to visit. A lot of history down there. Now, earlier today, Rex Tillerson called a press conference, and he was, everybody was saying, what is it going to be, North Korea? Is it going to be Syria? What's it going to be about? And apparently he called the press conference to deny rumors that he was considering resigning. Now, we don't know who started those rumors and if somebody's trying to put pressure on him to step down, but he stood up there and said, no, he's staying. And we know that Tillerson and Trump are now kind of banging each other on the forehead, specifically over issues like North Korea. So there may be another faction fight inside the White House. Ultimately, Donald Trump is the president, and if he says Tillerson has to go, Tillerson will be gone. We're going to take a phone call. James in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me good?
Mm-hmm. I hear you just fine.
Yes, I still want to know, have you seen any CCTV footage from Las Vegas?
You mean from inside the hotel? No.
Anywhere. It's Las Vegas. We all know as Americans, Mike, it's Las Vegas, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of closed-circuit TV cameras in and around that place.
Well, the only ones that would be of use would be the ones that are monitoring the elevators in the lobby and the hallway outside the room here. I'm sure there's CCTV cameras monitoring traffic on the street, but you can't really identify people in those things.
Well, yeah, but you know how they said that he took 23? Come on now, how many trips do you have to do how many trips would you have to do to make the scene in that room? I mean,
no, I absolutely agree. There should be videotapes of him on the hotel security system of making these repeated trips in the elevator. Even if he's using one of those little carts for the luggage, he's going to be making a few trips. And I think a lot of people would be very curious why, when he was already moved into the room, all of a sudden he's got all this extra luggage. But again, it should be on video.
And even he couldn't even use a luggage crate for a single carrier. Because think about the amount of weight. Not only the weapons, but the ammunition. And then it just seems like this event is like a one-pot all type thing. They want to put everything in there. And hopefully it shocks the American people to the point where because now you start seeing people really pushing the idea of if anybody's on any type of pill, then they shouldn't have it, or on a terrorist list. And then all these things are very abstract and wide. They throw a net wide.
Well, now hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. I actually am sympathetic to the idea of limiting firearm ownership to people who are on prescription antidepressants that are known to trigger these acts of violence. I would rather see these particular medications banned completely because they are dangerous. But in this case, diazepam, again, the only linkage to violence between diazepam/Valium is it lowers inhibitions. So people who are already prone to acts of violence are more likely to carry them out. But that, again, does not fit the profile of Stephen Paddock.
But we all know that even our own police force are on antidepressants. That's
yeah,
why
they are.
It's a farce claim because you have the whole SWAT team is loaded up on it, and they're driving around in military tanks.
Yeah, they are, and they got very powerful weapons.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, nothing about the official story makes sense. And I think the government is realizing that people are very skeptical about it because they keep coming out with new things to try and say, oh, he was radicalized, he was this, he was that, his girlfriend is dirty, his father was crazy, and you can almost smell the panic that they're not getting traction with us. And as of the last word, the GOP Congress is saying they are not going to entertain any new gun legislation in the heat of the emotional moment. So if this was a staged incident to push the gun grabber agenda, it fell flat on its face.
Watch them try to link the girlfriend, since she's Filipino, and with the ISIS thing, and say, oh, it was ISIS in the Philippines being sponsored by Korea and helped with Iran. You know, some crazy connection like they did with North Korea and Iran.
Well, everybody's out there trying to take advantage of this for their own particular agenda, and that's another thing that undermines the credibility of the story, is you've got these people over here saying he's linked to Antifa, that's why he was shooting at Trump supporters. You have these people over here saying, no, he's working for ISIS. Now they're trying to claim he was running guns to ISIS. We're going to see ISIS, making a deal for contraband weapons in the middle of a Las Vegas hotel. I don't think so. Somewhere out in the desert's really more appropriate to that. But
we need that CCTV footage.
I agree. I absolutely agree. The question is, the longer they delay, the more we have to think of the possibility that any footage that is released is being staged after the fact.
Well, Mike, I'm going to let you go on this note, too.
All right, well, we're going to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call. Clinton, Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I worked on a lot of these casinos. I'm a pipe fitter.
Yep.
I want to agree with the previous caller. it's like the Pentagon, Oklahoma City, the London bombing a dozen years ago. They're not showing the footage, and if it fit the official story, we would have seen it. Just proving the guy, was carrying this stuff up to his room. Anything. We're not seeing nothing. Well, certainly they got a picture of him checking into his room. And not only that, did they violate their own security measures? Because if I was one of them family members that got injured or died, I'd be suing them for wrongful death. And I think this is all going to come out in the court. They can't show a fake footage because if it comes out in court and they fake the footage, they could be sued up the kazoo. No, this thing hasn't settled. They're in a real pickle. If the official story isn't true, Circus or whoever owns Mandalay Bay now, they're in a real pickle, boy. I just cannot see how this guy could do this. I've lived in Vegas for a long time, and there ain't nowhere in those casinos you can go where you're not under video surveillance. And they can't even show a picture of this guy checking in and getting his room key.
That would be unconvincing. What we want are videos of showing this guy making the necessary number of trips, carrying gun cases or whatever, golf bags, whatever he's hiding the guns in, up to the room here. But the longer they wait before providing such videos, the more we have to consider the possibility they're being faked. And unfortunately, the technology to fake these things is becoming more and more accurate and sophisticated with every day that goes by. And sometimes it gets very hard to tell if what you're looking at is real or not.
But even that's risky, Mike, because if this goes to court for wrongful death, and it turns out they fraudulently made these things to show to a courtroom, that's another problem for them. But one more point I wanted to make is on Fox and Friends, the morning after the shooting, Monday morning, they were showing the SWAT team after the takedown. They were showing them in the hallway. Okay, now those were still pictures. As far as I know, I don't watch much TV, but as far as I know, they haven't even shown that. I mean, we are getting nothing. We are getting zero. And if it fit the official story, we'd be seeing stuff.
Well, I got to tell you right now, the families of all the victims and all the wounded, they do have a strong case for negligence on the part of the security at the Mandalay Bay Hotel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I don't think we've seen the end of this, and I don't think they're going to get much support from Trump as far as the corporation. I'm thinking the worst. I'm thinking this was another op, and some little girl with blonde hair who recently lost an election and her gang of little Hillary bastards. And that's all I got to say about that. And you have a good day, Mike.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. I mean, certainly Hillary did not hesitate to take advantage of the shooting in Las Vegas with her screed about silencers, even though silencers weren't actually used in Las Vegas, and succeeded in having Paul Ryan basically yank that bill that would have deregulated suppressors for hunting rifles. But that appears to be as far as it's going to go, because we're hearing from the GOP they're just absolutely refusing to entertain any gun legislation, while emotions are still running high from Las Vegas. And, of course, that's the whole point of a false flag attack, to get the emotions running high so that, everybody will just stampede it into surrendering more of their rights and trying to become more dependent on the government. All right, Clint, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And let's see, we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, Michelle Obama is out there with some really kind of bizarre analysis of why the country doesn't trust politicians. You're not going to believe this when you hear it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about domestic politics here. And apparently Michelle Obama when she was speaking at the Pennsylvania Conference for Women, came on out with the observation that people don't trust politics because the GOP is all men, all white. Ooh, bad men, bad white people. Michelle, you incredible nincompoop. People of all races, creeds, colors, genders, orientations do not trust politicians of all races, creeds, colors, genders, orientations, because politicians as a class are greedy, corrupt, self-serving liars who would sell their own mother for $1. A politician of all races, creeds, colors, genders, and orientations is someone who will take your money, screw your spouse, and still vote against you, then shower themselves with all kinds of gratuitous and pointless honors and fall in love with their own legend. That's why people don't trust politicians. And that includes those of all colors. It's amazing here. Sherman kicked off a ruckus by claiming that at least 21 state election systems had been attempted to be hacked. And the Department of Homeland Security didn't say who did it. In fact, they admitted they didn't really know. But, of course, immediately the corporate media presumed it had to be Russia. There are no hackers anywhere on planet Earth other than Russia. We all know that. And the story went all over the place, and all of a sudden we're starting to see the state governments call the Department of Homeland Security and saying, no, we're not seeing it here. Well, apparently the U.S. Intelligence Committee has said that the probe into alleged Russia's meddling into the 2016 presidential election has not come to a definitive conclusion. However, no vote totals were affected by outside hacking. We know that the vote totals were affected by illegal immigrants who were voting, dead people who were voting, various things like that. But outside hacking, they're saying it wasn't really a factor. Now, over at the New York Post, they're saying the time has come for Trump to issue a pardon to Julian Assange to get that information that he has on the DNC email leak. This information exonerates Russia. We're all pretty much sure it'll point to Seth Rich as the leaker. And Donald Trump promised us he was going to drain the swamp and he was going to go after Hillary Clinton. And it's amazing how he is now just as standoffish as the attorney generals, plural, and the heads of the FBI, plural. They're all afraid of that narcocracy at the middle of our government, because we know how vicious and violent the drug lords can be. Apparently, over at the Senate Intelligence Committee, Burr is saying that Christopher Steele is stonewalling the committee on all the questions about that Trump dossier. You know, the one that claimed that Trump and these two hookers did icky things in the presidential suite at the Moscow Hotel. And they're trying to find out, is there something there? And the guy who wrote this dossier is just not talking. He's not cooperating at all. And that right there tells you it was a hoax. And so far, they're saying that while they're going to go on investigating, there is zero evidence to support any of the claims made in that dossier. Now, Roger Stone is out there saying that Mueller is trying as hard as he can to find a way to indict Donald Trump. We know that he's using state laws, state courts, to indict people to put them under pressure, knowing that Trump can't pardon them. And it's a hatchet job. He's gone so far off the range, and he's got so many conflicts of interest. This guy should never, ever have been appointed as a special counsel, looking into the president, knowing that he's a hardcore liberal Democrat, knowing that he loaded up his staff with hardcore liberal Democrats. This is not objective. It is not honest. It is not unbiased. It's lawfare against the president. Now, getting on over to the war zones, as you know, Russia has been complaining of the fact that the U.S. coalition airstrikes always seem to miss ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and if they're not blowing up critical Syrian infrastructure, they're actually starting to hit some of the Russian forces on the ground. And Russia is not happy about that, all the more so because the United States really isn't supposed to be there at all. They do not have the permission of Syria's government to be there. They do not have the permission of the United Nations to be there. Well, Russia has upped the ante and just has come on out outright saying that the U.S. is supporting and working with the Daesh terrorists in Syria. And we know about all these reports of airdrops into ISIS, weapons, ammunition, supplies, and so forth and so on. And the fact that U.S. forces have, in several instances, intervened to try and create escape corridors for ISIS to get out of areas that have been surrounded by the Syrian army. But, of course, the Pentagon is denying this. The Pentagon is out there saying, what? Us? Aiding ISIS? How silly can you be? I mean, that's tinfoil hat conspiracy wacko stuff, you know, to think that we, the United States of America, would ever stoop so low as to actually be funding and arming a terrorist group. It's just silly. It's just absolutely silly. I don't even know how to respond to that. Now, not too long ago, there was a spectacular explosion up in Ukraine at an artillery warehouse near Vinnytsia. And everybody's pointing fingers. Oh, it had to be the Russian saboteurs. It had to be this. It had to be that. Well, now all of a sudden there is a suggestion that Ukraine may have actually done it themselves because the warehouse was filled with this outdated Soviet second-hand equipment. Okay, am I back? Okay, I'm back. I don't know why Skype is just completely bogus here today. So basically the idea that, okay, we just lost our call. Boy, this is just horrible. Let me try and call him again. Okay, there we are. We're back now, and we're back on the air. Let me get my Skype window back where it's supposed to be, and we are good to go. Boy, isn't it wonderful living in a modern industrialized nation with good computers and good software that we can depend on and rely on to do what we're doing. So getting on back to Ukraine and the explosion of this artillery warehouse, there are now allegations Ukraine's government did it themselves because the warehouse was filled with all this old, outdated, worn-out Soviet second-hand weapons. And that's what Ukraine has been using in their battles against the breakaway eastern Ukrainian republics. Well, now that it's all destroyed, and now that Ukraine is buddy-buddy with NATO, NATO is going to replace all of that lost weaponry with brand new, up-to-date, taxpayer-funded goodies. So that may be what's going on there. Let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. What happens if NATO don't give them no weapons? They're not going to have nothing left. Nothing wrong with those weapons they had. You know, they worked back in the 70s and 80s, they'll still work.
Well, for the kind of fight they're looking at over in eastern Ukraine, yeah, they're perfectly adequate.
Hey, Mike, Michelle Obama, she just continues what I said yesterday of how they keep pushing this divide.
Yes.
You know, like it's us versus them. And
you white people are evil. You white people, you're all former slave owners and descendants of slave owners. And by the way, that's not true. When slavery in the United States was at its peak just prior to the Civil War, only 1.5% of Americans owned slaves. And by the way, not all of them were white. There were actually blacks who owned other blacks. So this idea of saying that all the white people are evil, no, we're not evil. Again, I think we're seeing a lot of resentment from other groups within the country that, you know, like Zimbabwe, they just want to take the wealth away from the white people, shower it on themselves, and they're struggling to come up with some kind of a way to say this is just and honorable and fair for us to take away the property that the white people built for themselves, just like Zimbabwe.
Unfortunately, Mike, she tells them that, and then all these college professors, they tell their students that. They indoctrinate them, basically, not from birth, but almost, to go out and hate white people, and they don't look at hating themselves because they're a cult. They think they're doing the work of, the liberalism or Marxism or whatever, So this is a very dangerous thing to say from people like, as an ex-president's wife, these people just have an agenda, Mike, and I'm telling you, Mike, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, the agenda here is the liberals were in absolute shock when Hillary lost last November, and I don't think they're dealing with it in a mature way. And what they're doing is they're going to double down on this race card going into next year's midterms and certainly into 2020, where they're, and it's not just the race card. Look at all these liberals who are coming on out saying that any women who voted for Donald Trump, they only did so because their husbands made them. Their evil male counterparts made them vote for Trump, or they voted against their own voice. And I really don't see it working all that effectively, but that's all they've got to work with. The liberals don't really have any ideas on how to make life better in this country.
Yeah, but they can burn down the country.
They sure can. They sure can, and I'm very concerned about what Antifa is planning for November 4th.
Hey, Mike, on Trump with the draining swamp, I picture him draining the swamp with a garden hose, and then you have, right above him, 20-inch pipes dumping swamp water back over on top of him.
Well, that's a good image there, but again, I think the problem is Donald Trump is not going to be able to drain the swamp because he hired too many of those alligators to be on his own staff.
Yeah, I still think he should have got rid of everybody in the NSA, closed down the data center. The data center did any good. Hey, if you believe the 9/11 story, the CIA didn't stop anything. The NSA didn't stop it. They didn't stop the Boston bombing. The Russians warned us about going to Dagestan, 10, 12 times. They didn't seem to stop that because maybe, hey, they didn't want to.
They didn't stop Las Vegas. Supposedly this guy, bought a huge number of firearms in a very short interval of time. Their computer system doesn't flag that and say this guy's buying a lot of guns. That would be the most obvious thing I think the BATF would have in their registration system, because we're being told that all of these weapons were acquired legally. That's a big talking point on this gun grabber hoax, is that this stuff is all legal, but we need to make it illegal. Well, again, when you buy a gun, you got to fill out the permit, and then you're going to have to register the thing. And all you need is in that BATF computer where it's got your record, there's just a little subroutine that says how many have you bought in the last 6 months. And if it's above a certain number, you get flagged. That, to me, makes a lot of sense here. But again, I don't think Stephen Paddock was the shooter. And one of the reasons I think so, and I've noticed the corporate media has completely blocked this away, was that second broken window up on the floor on the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Because if you look at the floor plan, the suite, the nice suite that Paddock had, wrapped around the end of the building, but that broken window that was closer to the middle of the building is a completely separate room. You have to go out into the hall, and you have to have the key card to get into that second room.
And why would you bring all those guns? You don't. If you go into a gunfight, you don't carry 23 guns into the. You would have 2 guns or 3 guns with a lot of ammunition. It just doesn't seem odd. It looks like somebody just brought him in and threw him in there to make it look like he was, it's a white guy with a lot of guns,
Yeah,
or
that's
maybe there was going to be more people.
That's my
maybe there's more people there,
That's my observation too. Again, the way a huge bunch of those guns were just thrown onto those chairs, and real gun owners don't treat their weapons like that. Because you can break things like the sights, you can knock them out of alignment. The way those guns were just dumped on the chair, that's a prop guy dressing a set. That's what it looks like. And again, there's a little bit of brass on the ground, but nowhere near as much as you would expect, from all the gunfire that was being heard.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here and heading on out here. Okay, as you know, there's a growing willingness to talk about just how much Israel is influencing there's something wrong with our Skype here. There's a growing willingness to address the question of whether how much Israel influences our foreign policy, and in particular our war policy. And there was an article that came out from Aleppo News, letters from Israel partisans that took America to war. And they're taking a look back at an organization that was started in 1997, the Project for the New American Century. And it's actually still around. They changed their name to the Project for, I forget what the new name is, but basically their statement of principles was to advance a Reaganite foreign policy of military strength and power projection. And in their internal policy papers, they talked literally about a 100-year war to bring the rest of planet Earth underneath domination of the United States of America. And most of the people who were in the Project for the New American Century had strong ties to Israel. And this brings us to a couple of stories that have come out right now. This is over in South Front, the Syrian War Report, where Israel is now complaining that Assad is winning. And the Syrian government forces have liberated the villages of Aksh, Jabariah, Wadihi, Nashimi, and divided the ISIS-held pocket in eastern Salmiya to two separate parts. More when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So basically, Syria, aided by Russia, are just about wrapping this whole episode up. And Israel's unhappy. Israel's crying, oh my goodness, Assad is winning. That's not the way it was supposed to happen. We want Assad to lose. And they're rolling around on the floor and they're kicking and they're screaming and throwing their usual tantrum. And they follow it up here with this article that comes from Russia Today, where Israel is calling for the U.S. to be more active in Syria. Israel's unhappy that Assad is winning. What do? Do they go into Syria? No. They go to the United States, and they get the United States to fight and pay for wars against Israel's enemies. So, yeah, there is an issue of just how much of our foreign policy, how much of our war policy is being dictated to us by Israel. And it's legitimate to ask that question, especially for families who have lost family members or have had family members come back from the wars in wheelchairs. It's legitimate to ask just what exactly are our kids being killed and crippled for? For who exactly are our kids being killed and crippled? That's a legitimate question to ask. Now, getting on to the economic news. Apparently, a lot of people are looking at Donald Trump's new tax plan, and a lot of people are very unhappy with it. It's cutting corporate tax rates from 35% to 20%, and they're sort of hemming and hawing and trying to get everybody used to the idea that there's going to be a significant tax increase on the middle class. And the middle class are already feeling that they're overtaxed as it is. Actually, we're all pretty much overtaxed considering what we get back from the government. I mean, it's time for Americans to ask, look at all the money that you give the government. Are you getting value for that money? And for the vast majority of Americans, the answer is going to be no. No, you don't. Because the money isn't being spent on America and Americans. It's being given to Israel, and given to the war machine, and given to other governments around, given to Wall Street. So Moody's is basically threatening a credit downgrade on the U.S. government if the Trump tax plan is passed, as currently contemplated. Moody's is basically saying that the U.S. will be stripped of its AAA credit rating if the tax plan passes as it is right now. Frankly, I think the United States government AAA rating is the result of politics, political pressure. When you look at the debt of the United States, when you look at the outright fraud being committed in the calculation of the unemployment figures and the rates of inflation, I certainly wouldn't give the United States government a AAA rating. Be more honest, it's down there at B- level. Meanwhile, Venezuela is suggesting that the global oil trade ought to be carried from this point forward in the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan. I can't think of anything that's going to get Maduro nuked or drone struck faster than that. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on over to Catalonia. Things are very, very tense there. Spain's King Philip VI is calling the independence vote illegal and undemocratic. Now, being the king, I'm sure he's going to see it as illegal. It's not undemocratic. It's an exercise in democracy. It's an exercise. Catalonia is exercising their rights recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights over at the United Nations. They have a right to peaceful self-determination, and unfortunately, so far, it's not very peaceful. Now, Catalonia is going to formally declare independence from Spain this coming Monday, and the sparks are going to fly. Spain has already started sending the army into Catalonia, 2 convoys of troops. And that, of course, is not going to calm things down one tiny bit. And apparently there are already clashes starting to break out between the Spanish loyalists and Catalonian independence supporters. But what we're seeing here happening in Catalonia is the violent reality of the European Union. Once you are in, you don't get to leave. And I'm sure that the British people are looking at what's going on in Catalonia and wondering if that will be brought down on them when they finally go forward with the Brexit. See, it's easy for rulers to talk about democracy and freedom and so forth, but when you are threatening to take away large amounts of their land and their tax income, it's a whole different story. And they're going to get out the clubs, and they're going to do everything that they can to just hang on to the livestock. Because that's how they see the people. And around the world, everybody is now accusing the European Union of hypocrisy and double standards for declaring the Catalan independence referendum illegal. The EU certainly, and again, this is all the globalists. They're getting sick and tired of all these independence referendums, whether it's Crimea or Kurdistan and now Catalonia. They've got to find a way to stop this, or their almost new world order is going to start really falling apart. And as if this is going to make anything better at all, apparently Tony Blair is believed to be in the running to mediate talks between the Catalan administration, led by Carles Puigdemont, and the conservative leadership of Mariano Rajoy in Madrid. And Tony Blair is another politician I wish would just retire and go away. We all know phony Tony lied to his people to get him into Iraq. And he should not be out there running around the world acting like a big star right now. Over in France, Macron sparked fury by backing Spain and saying Catalonia does not have a right to secede, even though it is written in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Interestingly enough, Spain has bragged in its major newspapers that it used its military hackers to try and hack into and destroy Catalonia's poll while it was taking place. I don't know that I brag about it. It obviously didn't work. 90% of the vote still favored independence. But again, it shows what governments are willing to do to maintain power and control, because that's their only real agenda. Maintain control, maintain power. Everything else is window dressing. Julian Assange came on out and said, what Spain did to the independence referendum goes way beyond anything Russia is accused of doing in the U.S. Spain used their military hackers to rig an election. They failed miserably because election rigging can swing a contest a few percentage points. It cannot reverse a landslide, or everybody knows that's what happened. Now, Sir Alan Duncan in Great Britain, he's a staunch Europhile, a Remainer, is out there. He's angered a lot of people. He said the Brexit campaign has stirred up a lot of sentiment about migration among people who do not usually vote. And he accuses them of throwing a tantrum over this immigration, over the refugees, over the migrants, trying to make them feel bad for their concern over the deterioration of their culture and their society that this mass migration has brought into the country. And I have a comment for Sir Alan, which is that the people of Great Britain have every right to throw a tantrum when the government of Great Britain is acting contrary to the best interest of the people of Great Britain. And we're seeing all around the world governments that seem far more concerned with illegal immigrants and refugees than their own citizens. Because they're building the global government, the new world order. It will be beautiful. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, over in Germany, they're trying to recover from the recent elections. And yes, Merkel has retained her job as chancellor. But the three major parties, all three major parties in Germany suffered major losses. And the brand new up-and-coming parties, significant gains. And so now the president of Germany is out there, he's saying that the country is divided by walls of misunderstanding. You know, people are just not understanding the good things about migration and immigration. People are just not understanding all the good things about being part of the European Union. In other words, he's coming across like he thinks the German people are all idiots and morons. That is not going to get you reelected either. And I think people, not just in Germany, but everywhere, here in the United States of America, they're just fed up with this attitude that exudes from our political leadership that they are oh so smart and we are all oh so dumb. Because it's just not true. I keep thinking about to that comment back in the Watergate scandal, when Deep Throat was meeting with the Washington Post reporter in that garage. And he was responding to this idea that Nixon's people were the best and the brightest. And he said, no, the reality is they're not very smart at all. They got to be Nixon's henchmen because they were willing to do what Nixon wanted without question, including the bugging, sabotage, and so forth and so on. There's now a story here about this illegal Somali immigrant. And apparently he got into a fight and he killed a man and tried to activate the deportation order that he'd been dodging for 4 years with the idea that he would be deported, flown home, and he would escape justice for the murder. It didn't work out. And has now had his day in court. Again, migration. It's a filtering process. You are not getting the best people from the source country. You're getting people who couldn't make it in their home country. You're getting people who are fleeing prosecution. You're getting people who are criminals and they want to expand the range of their criminality, like MS-13 here in the United States. So, now I have a little bit of a clarification on that story that came out the other day about how over in Great Britain they're looking at a law where repeated viewing of terrorist websites, terrorist content, could result in a 15-year jail sentence. Well, apparently Home Secretary Amber Rudd came on out and clarified it and said that those who view despicable terrorist content online, including jihadi websites, Far-right propaganda and bomb-making instructions face the full force of the law. Far-right propaganda. Does she mean me? Moi? Far-right propaganda? This is one of those laws that can easily be abused and skewed to become an instrument of suppression. All right, we got a bunch of calls on the line here. James in Tokyo, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hey, Mike, you got to go easy on Tony Blair. I mean, he's just trying to get some kind of Spanish aid plane to fly over Catalonia to get shot down so they could send their troops over there to help the people not achieve their own independence for their own good.
Well, I don't think they need to use a false flag situation. I mean, it's just like when the United States declared independence, Britain invaded. And that clearly is what Spain is planning on doing. And this is going to get very, very bloody. Because King Philip VI, King Philip VI is not, he's not going to want this to happen at all. And Catalonia is not going to want to go back to being part of Spain.
Well, that's what they have done. Hey, Mike, I have to disagree with you, you and Dustin from the Jersey Shore about Michelle, because everybody knows that white males are the cause of political dissent in the U.S., and that if Hillary was elected, that there'd be a higher level of political consciousness that Black Lives Matter, except if you're Danny Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I do agree with Dustin when he said that it is kind of fishy about those 23 ARs that were in the hotel room. It kind of seems like a little too heavy to carry. And then when you had that Spanish woman running around saying everybody's going to die, I just have a feeling she was maybe like in the housekeeping staff or something and saw some stuff.
That could very well be. That could very well be.
And lastly, I just don't think that, well, after what happened with Vegas and they're coming out with all this anti-gun type of talk, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I mean, I live in Japan, and I've also lived in America and some other countries too, by the way, but the cultures are different. And I just think it's very hard, like when you have a culture in America that glorifies war and arms and invasions of other countries, and it puts people in a whole different mindset. And, you know, Japan is a little different, and maybe it's also different in Australia. And I think until something like that changes, that you're never going to get into any kind of realizable anti-gun reform laws.
Well, again, as I mentioned the other day, anytime a government descends into tyranny, one of the first things they're going to do is disarm the general population so that they can't fight back. They can't stand up and say you're fired, which is the whole point of the Second Amendment, to give the American people the means to resist oppressive government. And there's actually a United States Supreme Court decision, United States versus Miller, which said the Second Amendment guarantees to the American people the right to keep the same weapons as used by the uniformed services. And that's basically laying it out right there. But this government is afraid of an armed population. They want to keep their guns. Dianne Feinstein's keeping her guns. All these celebrities that are talking about we've got to ban guns, they all have armed bodyguards and security. It's just you and your guns they're worried about because they understand the American people are getting really, really angry about what's been going on in this country for decades.
And gun sales go higher every time after there's an event like in Vegas or anywhere else.
Oh, that's already happening here. And you think that they would realize that it is counterproductive, and especially now where you have the GOP Congress saying that they're not going to consider gun legislation while emotions are still running high from Las Vegas. And it's a wise thing to do. Never make an important decision in the heat of a moment. But that's the whole point of that false flag. So I would say, unfortunately, tragically, we may see another one of these in the very, very near future.
Stay out of the shopping malls Christmas time.
Who has money?
That's all I could say.
All right.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, Mike, nice talking to you, sir.
All right, thanks an awful
Take
lot
care.
here. All right. I tend not to go to the shopping malls in Christmas anyway. The decorations are already going up. By this time next month, I'll be in full Ebenezer Scrooge mode. By the time we get to actually Christmas, it's not decorations, it's decor, and it's tacky. I mean, there's Christmas stuff all over it. The one thing that we actually can't find, though, is Christmas wrapping paper. I don't know why, but that apparently is not on the list anymore. All right, let's take another phone call. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple of questions. Do you know if there were any drones flying around the concert before the shooting?
I have no way of knowing. None have been reported yet. It would almost make sense they probably would have had drones, with cameras for any possible video they were going to make of the concert itself. You don't have a concert that size without having a video to license out to TV after the fact.
Okay, that's interesting. And the final question. There was talk about the Australian guy who had a room right next to the so-called shooter.
Yes.
Any word about where he is or what happened to him?
Not right now. I imagine he's probably on his way back to Australia after his vacation got interrupted so rudely. But again, he said that there were definitely multiple gunmen on that floor, and he said that it was the police who shot one of the security guards.
Right, I heard that, yeah. Okay, well, that's it. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Jake in California. Aloha, Jake. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
So I heard you say yesterday something about that the Echo was a second gun shooting at the beginning of the concert.
No, I said we had to take into account that some of what was recorded on the video could have been echoes from all those hard surface buildings all around the area. But there is one video which definitely records the sounds of two different automatic weapons firing at different rates, and that proves that the second was not an echo of the first.
Well, we got when you're listening to the echoes, because those will be slightly slower than the actual weapon being fired.
No, they won't.
Well, I was in Iraq, and I'll tell you, when you're receiving fire and it's echoing off the buildings, it will be a little bit slower.
The only way it would be slower is Doppler effect, which means there'd have to be a tremendous relative velocity between the shooter and the echoing surface, or yourself and the echoing surface. But the physics of an echo are it'll be reduced in volume, but it will be exactly the same pitch and duration.
I don't know about that.
Well, go read a high school physics book.
Well, I've been in Iraq, and I've been shot at by numerous AK-47s, and I'm telling you, when it bounces off the building, it's not the same frequency.
Okay, well, you were under fire at the time, and I would suggest that maybe your perceptions of the moment are distorted by adrenaline. But again, get a high school physics book on acoustics, and you will verify for yourself that two different firing rates means that they're not echoes of each other. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go and get on back here to the news coming up on another commercial break. Phone lines are completely empty now, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news, interestingly enough, a federal judge, has refused to dismiss a lawsuit claiming the FBI used an unconstitutional subpoena to spy on anonymous supporters of jailed journalist Barrett Brown. Now, if you remember Barrett Brown, he was arrested in September 2012 and sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison after he shared an online link to files stolen in the 2011 hack of the security and intelligence contractor Stratfor. And U.S. Magistrate Judge Maria Elena James found that the lawsuit plausibly alleged that the government abused its subpoena power to try and unmask the identities of unnamed donors who raised money for Brown's legal defense, presumably so that they could be harassed. So that lawsuit is now moving forward, and that is a very, very good thing indeed. All right, we're coming up here now on a commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about some computer stuff, a lot of things going on out there. We'll be right back. And And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. There has been yet another data breach, this one the biggest ever. Yahoo is admitting that a data breach that happened all the way back in 2013 affected all 3 billion, with a B, accounts. That's like half the population of planet Earth. And it happened during 2 separate data breaches. And basically, the entity responsible for selling Yahoo agreed to cut $350 million off the company's sales price early this year following these revelations. And, Verizon is acquiring Yahoo, and they formally closed the deal in June. But apparently, this is horrendous. That is a huge hack. It's totally out of control. And this is why I think we need to go back to a cash-based society. You can't hack cash. I got a quarter in my pocket. I dare you to hack that. And until they can get this cybercrime problem under control, the government and the bankers have absolutely no right whatsoever to push a cashless society on us. Apparently, the White House and Equifax are now saying maybe using Social Security numbers for an ID wasn't such a good idea after all, which is interesting because there actually at one point was a law that said the only thing Social Security numbers could be used for was Social Security. They weren't to be used for anything else, and everybody who used them for a college ID or file ID or account ID or credit cards or anything, they were all technically in violation of the law. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Francis in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha.
Aloha snack bar.
Oh, that works again. I just had a thought cross my mind earlier since this whole fiasco in Vegas and so forth at nauseam has occurred. And I'm reminded of the Boston Marathon bombing. Not that the two are connected.
No.
At least I hope not. But what prompted my train of thought about the Boston Marathon bombing is that, one, they've now coming out with a film about it, about people that were involved in it or victimized in it and so forth, which I thought was pretty sick.
Well, they're trying to cement the official legend in the mind of the public. It's like when they made that movie about Flight 93, the let's roll, we're going to deliberately crash our own plane and save lives, which is not what actually happened. And Hollywood is the handmaiden of the propagandist. They're going to make movies that resell the official story over and over and over again. And I'm certainly having no intentions of seeing a movie about the Boston Marathon bombing. Just as I didn't see Flight 93, I'm not interested.
Well, I can empathize on that note, even though, unfortunately, it did come on major TV or regular TV or whatever channel. And unfortunately, my other half decided to sit up and watch it, and I'm thinking, are you nuts? But to say the least, I am looking at, since that was about 4 years ago when that event happened, and they're now coming out with a film about it. The question is, many years, will it be 5 or 10 years from now, that they come out with a film regarding the Vegas shooting?
Probably as soon as they feel they need one, and it won't be seen as exceptionally tacky.
Well, there's that too. And the question is, how much they're willing to. Well, not a matter how much they're willing to, but how much they can think they can milk it for.
Well, usually when they make a movie for propaganda purposes, getting a profit would be nice. That's not the main objective, and they're willing to absorb certain amounts of economic losses. What they'll do is they'll set up these production companies as shells, which basically you want to do anyway. That's why on movies you see today, there's a whole bunch of production company names at the beginning. These are companies set up to invest in that one film only, and sometimes you're not really sure where the money comes from. Very often it'll be coming directly from the government, and they'd like to make a profit. That's not their real agenda, and if the film loses money, they just shut down the shell corporation and everybody skedaddles. Anyway, listen, Francis, stay on the line. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're talking with Francis in North Carolina. We're talking about Hollywood movies and how very often they're used to promote propaganda, to sell the official story to America as to what happened. I got an email from somebody saying that they've heard there's already talk of a movie based on the first responders in Las Vegas, so they may feel they need to rush that on out and get people to see that. And people tend to believe what they see in the movies, even though it's not true. Good example would be Hillary and silencers. People actually think that there are these little tubes you can put on a gun and pull the trigger and there's no noise, like you see in the James Bond movies. It's a movie. They don't really exist. And I remember...
Mike,
go ahead.
That didn't take them long to come out with that now, did it? However, on a side issue, when you mentioned about whether it becomes financially advantageous or not, doesn't really matter. It reminds me of a scenario back about 5 or 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, where the question was is whether or not the production of genetically modified food would be financially advantageous to submit to the everyday public because of what they go through to conduct such genetic engineering to start with. And I heard it said, well, you know, it would not be financially advantageous because they would take a loss and cut in finances and all that. And I thought, you know something, when it comes to messing with the gene pool of the food that everyday people use to keep themselves going, do you really think they concern themselves with how much of a loss and cut in finances they're going to suffer? No, they're more concerned about how they can affect the everyday person's life. And the fact that it's going to send people to the pharmaceutical industry to get a remedy for something that is really going to mess them up physiologically. So,
well, there's another aspect there. There's another aspect there. What I think Monsanto's grand design is because I'm sure that Monsanto scientists knew that this little 10-yard or 10-foot buffer zone around the fields was not going to contain the pollen from the GMO crops, and that over time heritage plants would become contaminated with the designer genes. And I think what Monsanto's plan is for the natural varieties of food to go extinct, possibly along with the honeybees as well, and that would force every food provider on Earth to buy their seeds from Monsanto, and once they're there, they can start raising the price on those seeds. They want to have a monopoly on food production the way the Federal Reserve wanted to have a monopoly on the global economy.
Ouch.
That's what I think.
Yeah, that would certainly send the gene pool right down the drain.
Well, again, the way these products are being recklessly marketed without really knowing what they're doing, and we're seeing Monsanto is out there, rather than address the fact that there are demonstrable issues with glyphosate and the genetically modified corn, they're just spending all their money suppressing this information, threatening the media, don't you report on this or we'll pull our advertising, ghostwriting articles to go in the science journals and so forth and so on. Their attitude is, we don't care that the product doesn't work. As long as we can keep the public in the dark, everything is fine. That's
true. Of course, then again, Monsanto, you know, is not the only one. There's the Magenta, there's Bayer, there's a whole myriad. Cargill.
I wouldn't call it a myriad. I mean, there's a whole bunch of players, but I would imagine that they're probably all, you know, they get together, the CEOs get together, and they're figuring out the best way to maximize the profitability of what they're all collectively doing.
Oh gosh, that's a genetic roulette of a nightmare, or is that backwards?
Well, you can make that argument, but again, I think most of the damage that we're seeing coming out of GMO foods is not intentional. It's incidental, it's accidental, but they're just in such a rush to get these products on out and beat the competition that they're willing to take these chances with other people's lives. I'm still of the opinion that Morgellons disease is a very early example of a mistake with GMO. Because where this Morgellons disease outbreak happened was the same place that was they were growing test fields of early GMO crops, and those little fibers that were growing out of people's skin, somebody tested them and they found plant DNA in there. So that may have been a rather bad mistake. Unfortunately, it does seem to have gone away. But all it's going to take is one mistake to create an extinction level event, like epicite breaking into the wild.
True. Whether they consider it or construed it.
Hello, are you there? I think you just faded out. Are we losing our phone call again? Okay, Mike, can you hear me? Oh, there you are.
Interest.
Okay, we lost our connection there for a minute. Could you back up a little bit for my benefit?
Oh, okay. I apologize.
No, it's not your fault.
Whether it's intentional or accidental, I think it more to be intentional, because otherwise they would do what they need to correct the problem. But with the financial aspirations in place, they have no intention of doing that. As long as they can get their bottom dollar, they don't really care.
Well, I think the idea is they don't want to try and correct the problem, because that would be admitting that there's a problem, and that would devastate their current sales of that current product. They'd basically have to go back to the beginning and develop a whole new product all over again and convince people that it was going to be safe. And from the point of view of the CEOs, it's much less expensive, much less costly to just keep your public relations department out there suppressing this information.
You're nailing it. You're nailing it. Oh, gosh. Have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Francis. We're going to let you go and switch over to James in Atlanta. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to make a comment about the Barry Seal movie, then I had a couple of questions about the Paddock family.
Yes.
Have you seen American Made?
Have not seen it yet.
I saw it today, Mike, and I would rate it a 5 out of 10. It was a little bit hokey. It didn't really seem like it was. It seemed almost like a comedy, but I'd give it a 5 out of a 10. And do you know if the victims will be able to sue that guy's estate? Because many people are going to be paralyzed and hurt, or will his, like if a will comes out, will he have any claim on his estate in a lawsuit?
Yeah, I imagine they would.
Like a civil suit?
I imagine they would, and he's a multimillionaire, so you're going to be able to find all kinds of lawyers who are going to be willing to work on contingency to present such a case, because there's definitely an expected return there. But if you want to talk about going after the deepest pockets, again, there's a compelling case for negligence on the part of the Mandalay Bay security staff who let this happen. 23 guns up in the room. Plus foreign security camera hanging there in the hallway, and security didn't notice it.
Well, I'm curious if that guy changed his will, or sometimes when people they start acting, selling certain things or moving things around. So I'm just curious if there's any kind of a trail, if we'll ever hear about his will or. His brother, did you see the video with his brother?
Again, I don't think this guy was actually the shooter. I think he was just along for the ride one way or the other. But again, it doesn't matter what he's done with his will. If there's a civil litigation, it's going to come in ahead of everything that's in the will. Because outside debts and obligations and settlements come first, and then if anything is left over, it would be divided up according to the instructions in the will.
But if he was planning on dying or whatever, he might have made some recent changes. One interesting thing, somebody mentioned about the guy next door from Australia, and I forgot that they said that lady was an Australian citizen, the one he wired that money to.
Well, apparently he wired that money to his girlfriend, to his girlfriend's home in the Philippines.
He's supposedly an Australian citizen, but it's sad. It's very sad. We all got to pray for the people, and hopefully they'll have some legitimate charities we can donate to.
Well, at this point, I'm sure that somebody's going to be setting up something for the survivors and for the families of the victims. But again, I would imagine that already the lawyers are queuing up for lawsuits against Paddock's estate and against the Mandalay Bay itself, and possibly even against the venue where the concert was held, because obviously their security was inadequate.
Did you see that video with his brother?
Yes.
Because he seemed kind of odd, but I guess he's under love.
Yeah.
What about are you planning? I was going to ask, are you planning on seeing American Made?
Probably I'm going to wait till it comes out on cable, because my lady love, the theaters out here in Hawaii are value engineered and the seats are incredibly uncomfortable, and Claire just can't sit through an entire movie in those hard seats, where she gets all kinds of pains and stuff. So we tend to not do theaters at our age, and we just wait patiently for it to come out on cable.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I hope you have a great day.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We had a comment the other day about how the film is teasing and tantalizing about Clinton and Bush, but it does stop short of significant revelations. And apparently information, public files in the Arkansas, the police files, are no longer there. So somebody already preemptively had a massive file cleaning here. All righty, let's move on here. We were talking about Equifax. Huge mess there. They're discovering already that another additional 2.5 million more Americans were hit by the Equifax breach. And we may still not have the whole number. Now, with that in mind, this is really going to sound amazing. The Internal Revenue Service has just awarded a $7.25 million contract to Equifax to verify taxpayer identities. Right now, all things considered, I don't know that Equifax should have been awarded that contract. But again, the whole computer sphere, if you will, is just a horrible mess. Code writing has become very sloppy, just like the GMO companies are rushing out their products without adequate testing. We're seeing the same thing with software companies. They just get the software out the door and they sit back and wait for you to find the mistakes and send them in, and then they'll fix them in a later release, because that maximizes their profitability. They don't have to have an internal quality assurance department that's anywhere near as large. You know, they'll do alpha testing internally, then it goes to the beta testers, and then it goes on out there. But every new release of Microsoft Windows goes out with thousands of known bugs, but they're there to just capture that market as quickly as they can. And as a result, there's a lot of slop out there. And that's why we see all these breaches. It's not just Equifax, it's Yahoo. It's your banks. It's the cable TV companies. It is wildly out of control. And part of the reason is because modern software development has become very complex, where the software is being developed by large teams of software engineers who don't really have an overview of what this is going on inside the system. Just everybody's got their little assigned task, and that makes it very easy for major problems to slip all the way through to the end, and that's what the cyber criminals are looking for, along with the mandated backdoors coming from CIA and NSA. And that's why our current IT system on a national basis is an absolute disaster and an embarrassment. It is wide open to these kinds of intrusions. And to me, if I had Donald Trump's ear, I would say this is a critical national emergency, because computers are not the little toy hobby gizmos that we knew in our youth. They have become a critical component in our nation's economic machine. And if you're spending all your time getting the software to work, then you don't have time to do work on the software. If you're spending all of your time prying the criminals out of your system, then you don't have time to do that which it is that you're paid money to do. And it's rather amazing to see the very lackadaisical attitude coming from the government regarding this problem. I mean, if you break into a government computer system, they will come after you. But for the rest of us, just let the script kiddies run wild. That will force them to buy security software, and that's good for the economy. Because everybody buys a $600 computer, they're going to wind up spending another $400 on antivirus, anti-malware, and so forth, which doesn't always do the job. Right now, cybercrime in this country is costing billions and billions of dollars every year, plus countless hours in lost productivity. It is a clear and present danger to the nation's economy. And nobody in Washington, D.C. seems to want to do all that much about it. Maybe it's because they can't. Because the software has become too big, too bloated, too decadent to effectively manage. Or maybe it's because much of the cybercrime is originating from NSA and CIA, another way of plundering the people. You know, forget about civil forfeiture, taking $20, $30 from a driver. We'll just go on out there and ransomware a bunch of hospitals and stuff and get more money that way. Remember Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago the other day was saying they weren't going to raise taxes on the city, but they were going to balance the budget by having special police squads that did nothing but go on out and write tickets all day long for any minor infraction they could find. We're living in an age where the government is pillaging and plundering its own people. Why should it not happen in the online world? So, as you know, North Korea used to have a single internet link through a hard wire to China. They actually don't have a lot of internet in North Korea, contrary to all the propaganda about those North Korean hackers and how they broke into Sony, which, by the way, they didn't. It was an internal leak. But apparently Russia has now provided a second connection to the internet, which makes it much more difficult to threaten to cut North Korea off of the internet entirely. Maybe I need a second line through Russia. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I mean, if you really think about it, what is the proper function of the government relative to the people in the nation? It's basically to make sure the nation can function, that we have good roads so that we can get to work or transport products easily and quickly, good rails, same reason, that we have stable, reliable electric power, clean drinking water coming out of that faucet. And we would have to add to that, in the age of the internet and computers, that we have a stable, secure internet that we can rely on to convey our data from point A to point B without being intercepted and used against us. And on so many of those levels, our current government has failed. I saw a video the other day taken from the cab of one of these long-haul tractor-trailer rigs out on one of the major highways, and just huge holes in the pavement. And you could hear the truck just rattling and shaking as it's going over those holes. And they can't go as fast as they'd like because of the holes. I understand FedEx is upset. They're having to spend almost twice what they predicted they were going to have to spend on tires for their cars because of the poor quality roads. Here in Hawaii, we have, according to the Department of Transportation, the worst roads of any state. And somebody did a calculation and figured out that the average Hawaii driver spends $700 a year on repairs for their vehicle caused by the deteriorated roads. And with that light rail project going on, it's worse than it was before. We all know about the problems with tap water all across the country. It's not safe to drink anymore. We're seeing more occurrences of blackouts in our various cities. And, of course, as I pointed out before, the state of the art in software and computer security is abysmal. It's another product that's being marketed that doesn't deliver what it's supposed to. And it's kind of amazing to hear the government scream so much about Russian hacking, when their negligence over these last several years is why the internet is so wide open. Now, apparently, Google has found 7 security flaws in the widely used DNS mask network software. And these are all security vulnerabilities, and 3 of these could allow remote code execution on a vulnerable system to hijack it. Now, DNS Mask is a lightweight network application tool designed to provide DNS forwarder, DHCP, and router and network boot services for small networks. And apparently it's got lots of problems. And it not just theirs. We're hearing more and more reports about how these routers we have in our homes have wide open holes in them. Always remember, change the default password on the router. That's the first line of attack. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're waiting on our call from Regina Imburgia. And moving along here, back to the world of computers. Apparently, there has been an arrest and currently a hearing for extradition to the U.S. Of this individual, Alexander Vinnick, who is supposedly the creator and operator of a digital currency exchange, BTCE, which is suspected of being a gigantic money laundering operation involving at least $4 billion in Bitcoin transactions. And apparently U.S. authorities have linked this guy to what seemed like every major crime involving digital currencies in recent years, including the failure of Mt. Gox, Japan-based Bitcoin exchange that collapsed in 2014 after being hacked. And according to law enforcement, Vinnick obtained funds from the hack of Mt. Gox, laundered them through BTCE and TradeHill, a San Francisco-based exchange that he also owned. And while the U.S. is trying to portray Vinnick as the sole operator of BTCE, European authorities are skeptical of this view. They think there was a much larger crew that was operating behind it. So why is the U.S. insisting it's just the one guy? And again, when you have to recognize the criminality of the government we live under. Yeah, they got a piece of the action of everything. Okay, looks like Regina is here. So joining us on the air is Regina Imburgia, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what's going on in the world of water fluoridation, especially in the wake of the release of this study showing that drinking fluoridated water can actually lower IQ. And I guess they must have a lot of fluoride in the water in Washington, D.C. So, Regina, thank you for joining our show.
Well, thank you for having me on. I was happy yesterday, I think it was, towards the end of the show, or the day before, you actually mentioned that we're working on trying to halt this in Dallas. You just read a news release, I think.
Yes.
That we are trying very hard to stop the city of Dallas to put the hydrofluorosilicic acid in the water to raise the fluoride level. So thank you for mentioning it the other day and having me on today.
Well, so what do you want to share with us, first of all, about the report and what it found, and second of all, what you're doing to push this issue in Dallas forward?
Okay, well, what's exciting about this study is that it was a 12-year study, multi-million-dollar study, and the United States was part of it. Prior to this, there's been, many studies about the dangers of fluoridation, but the people in the United States don't honor these because, it was done in China, it was done in India, and they like to always blow it off. But this one is going to be very, very hard. First of all, the results came out on September 19th, 2017. So they're very new, and they are very, very hard for them to actually poo-poo in basic familiar words.
They can't dismiss them.
Dismiss it. There you go. By the way, I'm an activist. I'm not a scientist.
Okay.
But I'm a mother. I'm a concerned citizen. And so I got started with this actually almost 5 years ago. I went to City Hall because I didn't even know who my city councilman was. I had a group that was called Activists for Truth, and no one in the group knew who their councilman was or how city government worked. So we wanted to kind of get involved but take a project on at the same time. And I knew fluoridation was bad all my life, so I thought, this is a good one.
Yes.
For 50 years, no one has actually, done a good job to show them why it's a bad idea. And I thought, once we present the facts in Dallas, they might, think, good idea. Let's halt it until we see the proof. Because that's what basically we say is, show us the proof that it's safe and effective, and there isn't any. Well, now with this new study coming out, it's an extremely credible study because, you know, it was like some of the, University of Toronto was involved, University of Michigan, Harvard. I mean, it's very difficult for them to ignore it. And we're going to go to City Hall one more time, and we've been going. Our group has been going for several years. We only have 3 minutes to speak one time a month, but we have brought in doctors and scientists, and they still look the other way. And they stand on the CDC claim that it's safe and effective, and, you know, it was one of the top 10 wonderful discoveries of the 20th century. And they can't do that anymore with this study because it's conclusive.
Well, it's not just that, but don't forget the CDC has been scandalized by the fact that their report that claims there's no link between vaccines and autism has been exposed as a hoax by one of the study's own writers. But again, the vaccine court is still citing that study to deny benefits to vaccine injury victims, which shows you just how corrupt the whole system is. But yeah, CDC has been compromised. And, along with this study, it is really weird. We talk about how every time somebody is a threat to government or corporate interests, the media will demonize them and ridicule them. And I remember when I was younger and fluoridation was just getting underway, anybody who questioned it was portrayed as a kook. Was even in the movies, in the movie Our Man Flint, the actor they have replacing the president was out there screaming about don't fluoridate our water. Remember General Jack D. Ripper in Dr. Strangelove?
Yes.
He didn't actually say the word fluoride, but, I mean, that was the whole basis of his psychosis. They're putting things in our water. Oh, you're just being a kook here. Well, today, look at all the stuff they're putting in our water and how bad it is for us all. So
That's true. The thing we always say about fluoride, though, is that they're medicating us. A lot of the other things they put in the water, they say, treats the water. So we even have a major conflict here because we haven't asked whether we want to be medicated. And with most medications, you have to follow how does it affect the people and the interactions. And so just ethically, it's totally should have been stopped a long time ago. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Well, fluoride is known to be a mild tranquilizer. So if you go back to your Aldous Huxley and Brave New World, where the population is mandated to be on tranquilizers, this looks a lot like it. But we live in a society right now where these decisions about what goes in our body or doesn't are being taken away from us. And the most obvious area where that's happening is vaccination, where every time somebody invents a new vaccine, it gets slapped on that CDC list. I've lost count of how many vaccines there are now. But it's just a big moneymaker, and that's their concern.
I agree. We brought the movie to Dallas. Our group, we showed what is it called now? I don't remember the name of it. Isn't that terrible? But it's the one with Del Bigtree. Del Bigtree was in Dallas, and we invited the Dallas City Council to talk with these people. Dr. Wakefield was here, and to show them the correlation of the fact that the CDC threw away data and that they're not to be trusted, and that they're putting all of their, chance to have liability against them on a claim that it's safe and effective, and they're not even caring to look for the proof. Because it's worked. Mike, it's worked. Status quo has been fine for all these years. It started in Dallas in 1965, and it's continued. And they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to get that label put on them. We had articles, you're right, they try to dismiss you by saying you're a kook or a crank or whatever. But we had a large, we're in Dallas, right? So there's a news publication that came out in our defense and said, I myself even thought that fluoridation was bad, but let's look at it. Let's actually look at it. And so we've had some press on it on our side. D Magazine, which is a big magazine in Dallas, did a poll. 72% of Dallas said they wanted fluoridation to stop, but they ignored all this. But I really am excited and hoping that this is going to be the game changer. We're going on the 11th of October. Between now and then, like I sent you even, we have a petition, and numbers mean things to these council people. And if we concentrate I'm doing lots of calls to Sandy Grayson, who's the Quality of Life and Environment Committee Chairman. She may get a little nervous. Because you know what we were saying, too, is in Flint, Michigan, some of those officials that thought that they were going to be able to hang on to governmental immunity, they're not.
No.
They're being charged. So we did the correlation there with Flint, Michigan, and there's even an additional correlation, is that this hydrofluorosilicic acid leaches lead from the pipes. And in some of the poverty areas and older areas of Dallas, they do have a lead problem. So, I mean, our side of all of our credibility is building up, and we're hoping, oh, and let me tell you, this is important, too, for your audience. See, they sign a contract, the city council, they have to allocate the money to buy this hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is contaminated. It's a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry. It's not pharmaceutical grade, but they have to allocate the money. So it's a simple administrative process that has gone on every 3 years since 1965. Well, 3 years ago, we put the wrench in the gear, and we had one council member who was wonderful. He's been termed out, and he said, wait a minute, let's talk about this. And at one point, we had 4 council members that were going to vote on our side. We needed 8. 8 can stop the program, because if they don't have the hydrofluorosilicic acid, fluoridation stops. And then it'll be thrown to a very big controversy of what do they do next. So what I tried to explain to them, and I'm going to tell them on the 11th, is the brains and the future of these children is literally in the hands of the people that vote to purchase the hydrofluorosilicic acid. You see, without this chemical, fluoridation stops. And so that they can have it on their conscience of every child that's going to be affected after this study just came out now. So that was my long-winded story there, but the vote should happen, normally happens in October. But because that council member 3 years ago, he got it kind of delayed till January 28th, 2014. So I'm not sure whether it's going to happen, in October, November, December, or January, but it has to come up. So that's why I'm really wanting people to sign the petition. I think we have over 1,800 signatures on it. And then and it's an online petition. And what I say to people, because people say, well, I don't live in Dallas. Well, Dallas is such a big city that when Dallas does the right thing, it can affect other areas where people have been fighting it in lots of areas. But not only that, the mayor of Dallas wants to be this forward-thinking, we're a forward-thinking city and we're an international city. So it's not the same concept of just talking to your council person, and how it just affects you. Dallas affects a lot of people, and 25 communities buy our water, too. So it's very broad. So if anyone does call Sandy Grayson, and it's in our petition and it's in our press release and all that, her number is 214-670. Oh, let me make sure, because I have dyslexia. 4067. 4067. And just tell her where's the proof, and that they should not purchase this poison to put in the water, because they can't say that it's safe and effective for everyone, just like the CDC says, because it's not. It's been proven that it's damaging.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, we're very lucky here in Hawaii. They ended water fluoridation back in 1993, I think it was. And we actually are very fortunate in terms of our tap water here in Hawaii. When that whole Flint lead crisis broke, I got a water testing kit, and I tested our tap water. It's exceptionally hard, which makes sense when you realize we suck our water from inside an extinct volcano. But for the rest of it, no lead content, no microbial problems. We've got very good quality water here in Hawaii, and it is fluoride-free. And
Amen.
My understanding is there have actually been studies showing that while fluoride topically applied to the teeth can have a beneficial effect regarding tooth decay, that simply drinking fluoride in the water, they can't document it even has any effect on tooth decay at all.
Well, it's very minimal. Yeah, over a lifetime, maybe one side of a tooth or one tooth. So that's what we're saying. How can you compare or rationalize it in your brain, even if it did prevent tooth decay, to brain damage or all the other things that happen with fluoridation? See, only 50% of the fluoride leaves your body. So it's calcifying in your bones, And that's what fluorosis is. It's an outward sign that you're being poisoned by fluoride.
Okay.
And that's that whiteness on your teeth. And so, and it makes your bones brittle, and it's your thyroid, and it's just a bunch of things. But, of course, being that this study in the brain, I mean, it can change a child's IQ 3 to 6 points, you know, and that's not a high level of fluoride. See, some of these other studies, countries like India and Iran and China, they don't ever add water to the fluoride, but they have a natural high fluoride. They know, and there's tons of studies that show how crippling the stuff is in your body.
Yes.
Here, we're adding it. And the city of Dallas, 98% of the world does not fluoridate. 98% of the world, okay? And even in our own area, we have an affluent area called Highland Park, Turtle Creek and all that. It's like a donut in the middle of the city of Dallas. They've never fluoridated, okay? So there are areas, just like you're in Hawaii and Portland, Oregon. I mean, they've been trying for years to get them to fluoridate. But the majority, especially all the big cities, are definitely fluoridated in America. And we have a natural 0.5 parts per million in our water. It's insane that the city would take on the liability for the recommended 0.2 parts per million. Plus, they don't even regulate it well because it can't. The water's always fluctuating, yet their poison is being dripped in to our water.
Mm-hmm.
So many days, our water is above the dangerous level that the CDC even says, 1 part per million. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, and I'm not a really good science person about it. It's the general down to earth concept of, are you kidding me? You're putting poison in the water to possibly help the teeth, which they've proven in 1999 that it's topical anyways, and there's fluoride in all the toothpaste now. You can have all the fluoride you want. Why drink it? Oh, I know. Let me tell you this. This one scientist said a great thing. He said, if suntan lotion protects you from sunburn, that doesn't mean if you drink it, it'll give you any benefit. So
that's a very good way of putting it.
Wasn't that clever? I know. I like things like that are like real. You say to yourself, oh, yeah, that's a good point. And it's so visual or whatever you call it. So, but this is just as stupid. Plus, it costs the city a lot of money. And, this hydrofluorosilicic acid, listen how many more things there is. The Texas Constitution says anything that goes into our water has to go through all these rigors, all these studies. It hasn't even been doing that anymore. It's been years that they have not gone through all the necessary sign-offs, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been doing that. So this hydrofluorosilicic acid is contaminated with arsenic and lead and cadmium and uranium. I mean, it's unbelievable, all the other garbage that's in there. It's not at all pharmaceutical.
It's almost like they're using the human population as a toxic waste dump. And, given the fact that all toothpaste is fluoride and so forth and so on, it doesn't make sense to fluoridate the water. People who want the fluoride, they're going to get the toothpaste and get it anyway. So what is the other agenda? Is somebody making a bunch of money off of this? Are they bribing members of Congress? Do they want the population tranquilized by fluoride so that we don't stand up and say, hey, you're fired, government, get out of here? One story that I had heard was that the source chemical that this water fluoride is made from is actually a toxic waste produced in another area of industry, and it was just piling up, and they didn't know what to do with it. So somebody said, well, we'll just put it in the drinking water.
Yes, there's a documentary called Fluoride Poison on Tap.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Wittenberger made this, and he came to Dallas, and Dallas is featured in it. It was made, I think, in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, he had a drone fly over in, it's Mosaic is the company you're talking about, and they're the ones that mine the phosphate for the phosphate fertilizer industry. And this is the problem. Listen, you cannot put it in the water. You can't dispose of it in the air. You get fined for all these things. But if they sell it as a product, they get to get rid of it. So you're right. So actually, as far as chemicals go, they're not making a lot of money. It costs the city, a lot of money. But as far as other chemicals go, but they just want to dump it. And that's what they've been doing for years. They've been, dumping it in our water to get rid of it. So there's a lot of that whole story, too. But people should really check out that movie, Fluoride, Poison on Tap.
All right, we'll
really
look
good.
at that. Regina, we're at the end of our segment. We've got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much. And call back after the vote. Let us know what's going on. We're going to take a break for commercials. Phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. Back to our show. We're going to go to the phones here. Phil in Montreal. Aloha. Phil, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, how are you?
Doing fine.
Yes. I just heard your interview with Regina there.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't really, she kept referring to fluoride as toxic, but it goes much deeper than that. It comes down to back in 1947 when they started lacing salt with iodine because people weren't getting enough iodine in their diet. They put the iodine in the table salt.
Yes.
Well, one of the effects of adding fluoride to the water, it displaces the iodine in our system.
Okay.
So therefore, of course, the lower the iodine level, the more chance of reduced IQ. The other thing that's happened
well, it's also affecting the thyroid and your energy levels.
That is correct.
Okay.
Also, what's happened in about 1980, they started when they make the dough for the bread. They used to add iodine also in the flour and the bread. So what they started to do was put in bromide, and that causes the dough to be easier to smoothen, to make smooth.
Yes.
The other thing, so now we've added a lot of bromine to the system, which also displaces the iodine. Now everybody's being pushed. Oh, you got high blood pressure. Get off the salt. Well, you're getting off the salt. You're also reducing your intake of iodine. So all in all, we've gotten to the point where the last hit the iodine has taken is that fluoride. So by putting in the fluoride, they've actually reduced the amount of iodine everybody's getting. So what's happened is now the people's IQs are starting to be affected.
Mm-hmm.
The effect of atrial fibrillation now is going through the roof, and we're starting to find out it's not only the thyroid that uses the iodine, it's the heart and a whole bunch of other organs in the body. Every cell in the body has some quantity of iodine. The thyroid being the one that has the most. So people should look at how much iodine they're getting in their system, and certainly everybody's deficient in iodine. All you have to do is take a little bit of tincture of iodine, paint the square inch of your skin with tincture of iodine. If it disappears before 24 hours is up, usually most people, like in my case, I just found out about this, it disappears after an hour or two. So everybody's deficient. And that's causing a reduction in the IQ. And it's not just that iodine is, the fluoride is toxic. It displaces the iodine. That's what makes it really toxic.
Yeah, I could see that. Okay?
All right. Thank you, and thank you for listening to my little blurb.
All right. Well, Phil, we're going to let you go here. And before the commercial break, I do want to put on out Regina's website where they have an explanation of what they're doing and the online petition. And it's dogsagainstfluoridation.com. That's dogsagainstfluoridation.com. I'm going to be linking it to whatreallyhappened.com on this next commercial break, so you can all wait a few minutes and go and find it that way as well. So, anyway, let's see. Interestingly enough, I know we got callers on the line, but we're close to the commercial here. Apparently, prisons are starting to block in-person visits, replacing them with Securus communication software and hardware, a video feed. And this, of course, is being done to cut down on the amount of contraband that's being brought into the prisons. But it is imposing a burden on the families of the prisoners who have to pay a fee for the use of this system. So a lot of people are very concerned about this and why this added burden is being placed on them at this particular time. But we really are turning into that THX 1138 world. Nobody looks at each other anymore. We watch through TVs and cameras. We have to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take some phone calls now. Sherry in Fredericksburg, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I need some peace of mind here because I'm still worried about this Civil War stuff. Since our rights will, by law, will be altered, for instance, we can be held without a trial, like in Article 5 of the Bill of Rights. We can be just held. If globalists declare a civil war, I'm wondering if, and all this hacking too, you know, they could find out if we have debt or if we have money, and they could apply all kinds of things. If you have money, you could maybe lose your property. If you have debt, they might put you to work. You know, you just don't know. Our rights to peacefully assemble, could they be jeopardized? Could anything be turned into a civil war? I mean, what would determine? Would it have to be nationwide? You'd have to be armed, I guess, so there'd be a public danger. No person shall be held for capital or otherwise infamous crime unless, and then in these certain cases, except in cases arising in the land, naval forces, all that, or when in public danger. So how easy would it be for them to spring civil war on us just because, I mean, can we still peacefully assemble, or would that be too dangerous?
Well, it would depend on what part of the country that you're in. I mean, obviously, at the battle lines where the Civil War is happening, there are going to be restrictions. I think the further away you get from combat, it's probably going to a little bit looser. But again, there's definitely going to be a crackdown. Nobody's going to be allowed to criticize the war, show sympathy to the enemy, or doubt about, the indigenous forces. I think if there's going to be a civil war in this country, if Antifa is really going to try and start something on November 4th, it'll be more guerrilla in nature, where there won't really be like the Union and the Confederacy, and there's the Mason-Dixon line, and that's where it all basically starts. I think it'll be more distributed throughout our society. It'll be in the major cities. That's still going to be enough for somebody to be able to say, yes, this is a civil war. And, you know, if putting down the Civil War is the goal, then the military will be deployed to those areas where the conflict is going on, as we are seeing Spain do to Catalonia right now. But if, in fact, it's an excuse to declare national emergency and martial law, then it's going to be happening nationwide. But yeah,
okay, well, you'd have
when you have a tyrant take on over, they're going to do whatever they want with the people. Think about Pol Pot in Cambodia, for example. That's why the Founding Fathers gave us that Second Amendment, so that we could hold off an abusive government. And the government is clearly desperate to take that right away from us, along with the rest.
Well, we'd have to be armed, wouldn't we? If we wanted to assemble just to, I mean, I'd rather assemble on the radio, you know what I mean, like we do now.
Well,
but if people
too.
want to get out in public, you'd have to be armed for them to, I mean, otherwise you are not a threat. There's no public danger if they come at you like they did before. And,
that's
you're
that's not necessarily true. I mean, look at how the police handled the Occupy Wall Street protesters. None of those people were armed.
That's right.
And
they all dragged them in.
They got fire hose. They got hit with sound weapons. Some of them got run over by motorcycles. Tear gas. Remember that one guy got shot right in the head with a tear gas canister and suffered permanent brain damage.
Okay. Have you ever heard of Greg Sawyer? He was on Alex Jones. I just heard a little bit of him. Now, he knows this is about non-constitutionalists and globalists and what they're doing. It's not about Democrats and what they're doing. It's what's in our hearts, you know. It's our history, our flag, our Constitution. That's what's of primary importance. And we can be any party to love our history, our flag, and our Constitution. Now, I like what he was saying, and I didn't hear him for very long. I was kind of drawn over to the radio by a few things he said. Unite regardless of party. That got my attention.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Greg or Craig Sawyer? Do you know who he is?
No, I'm not sure who you're talking about. Again, you know, there are a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions about what we should be doing right now. Again, my position is I know things are horrible in this country, and they're rapidly getting worse, but I cannot condone violence. And as I said earlier in the week, as disappointed as I am in Donald Trump, and as disgusted as I am with the federal government, I would have to hold anybody trying to use violence to put themselves in power as an enemy, because whatever they would bring in would be much worse than what we've got right now. You're describing a lot of it. Somebody who comes in with an armed coup d'etat, they're going to disarm the population just to prevent a counter-revolution.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't me making that noise. I don't know what that was from. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
I'm on a landline. Did you hear it?
No, I didn't.
Now that loud beep? Oh, maybe that's for my purposes. Well, yeah, I was just thinking with all this information, once they get, you know, everyone rounded up and put into jail without a jury and start sorting through them, you know, it's going to put us in a pretty bad position. But, you know, we'll survive. Just we need to remember who the enemy is, though. It's not Democrats, and it's not Republicans.
Nope.
Those aren't the enemies.
It's the money junkies.
I just want to... Yeah, it's the non-constitutionalists and the globalists that want the one world order. And I'm so sick of saying this is the Democrats are the reasons that we're in, Hey, Justin from New Jersey, Dustin. Yeah, he's a Democrat. See, it's what's in his heart. He loves his country. You know, it doesn't matter what political party you are. Well, I'm going to try to find out more about this Craig Sawyer. I think he really was saying some things that were very helpful to me, and that I know that there are people that understand it's not a party thing, and we've got to get, you've got to get the enemies straight. You've got to understand the problem if you're going to solve it, and the enemy is not the other party. If we're going to solve this problem, we've got to be able to be united on who the enemy really is.
You've hit it right on the head. The whole idea of having, a Republican and Democrat is to keep us divided and facing each other. That's wearing out, and that's why they're trying to crank up this black and white situation with Michelle Obama out there saying that the GOP are all these white males, and that's why Americans don't trust politicians. No, we don't trust politicians because, well, they're politicians. And that's it right there.
Right.
Sherry, I'm going to let you go. I've given you a lot of airtime here, and we got some more callers on the line. We're going to switch on over to Anthony in California. Aloha, Anthony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on. You were talking earlier about sodium fluoride.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make a comment regarding that. I used to take Prozac, prescription drugs. It was prescribed to me by my doctor, and the guy was getting big bonuses for giving me this stuff. And so the main ingredient in Prozac is sodium fluoride, and I didn't know that until I listened to Alex Jones and Mike Adams, and I cut that out like 6 years ago when I first started to listen to InfoWars, and then I got onto RBN, and I ran into you, and I just wanted to throw that out there. You didn't know that the main ingredient in Prozac is sodium fluoride?
I think I heard that many years ago, but it had slipped my mind when I was having my talk with Regina. But again, as I did say, it is a known tranquilizer.
Yeah, it is, and it would keep me up at night. I wouldn't be able to sleep and get back to sleep, and it would wake me up in the middle of the night. And I noticed that, my body, is is I don't know how to say this, but whenever I'm exposed to sodium fluoride, my muscles just cramp up on me. My fingers, my toes, my legs, and this would happen to me when I was taking large doses of Prozac. So I know that whenever I'm exposed to sodium fluoride, my body just tells me automatically that I'm being exposed to sodium fluoride. And it's just too bad that I'm not a biomedical engineer, or I know somebody that's biomedical engineer, because I suffered a pulmonary embolism back in 2006, and I almost died. And what happened was I was running, and my legs cramped up on me so severely that I tore my left calf muscle, and it's partially severed my artery, and it clotted, and the clot broke off. And 6 months later, I suffered a pulmonary embolism that almost killed me.
Yeah.
So, I just wish they would provide a link to these hazards that can happen when you're exposed to sodium fluoride. I just wish they would do that so I can sue people would be able to sue Eli Lilly,
Well, not just Eli Lilly, because fluoride compounds are a main ingredient in many pharmaceuticals. Mike in our control room it was just sending me a message. It's used as a base. And again, it is a natural tranquilizer, and it's based on a compound that if they can't sell it as a product, then it has to be okay. We're back again.
I almost lost you there. I'm sorry.
No, it's our, and for some reason our Skype connection today is fading in and fading out. We may be under hacker attack or who knows what's going on here. But basically, getting on back there, according to Mike in our control room, fluoride compounds are a main ingredient in many different pharmaceuticals, and it's used as a base. So it's really hard to get away from that stuff if you're taking any prescription medications at all. But you're right, there should be warnings. Now, again, over at the FDA, you can go in and there's a database you can search. And within the medications, there are these little package inserts on very thin paper and very tiny fonts where they have the legally mandated warnings, which it takes a microscope to read. But, okay, apparently Skype is just cutting in and out like crazy, so we'll...
Listen, Mike, I just wanted to bring this out to you that just stay away, or have your audience just make sure that they stay away from prescription drugs that may have sodium fluoride, especially antidepressants like Prozac, because the main ingredient is sodium fluoride. And
well, I generally tend to avoid prescription drugs anyway, but yeah, it's good advice to pass on there. There are a lot of things in there that are dangerous. It's not just vaccines that have this problem.
I know, Mike. I know. Somebody ought to regulate the pharmaceuticals, really.
Well, that's supposed to be that's supposed to be the FDA. But unfortunately, all of these government agencies, they're not looking out for you. They're acting in collusion with the very industries they're supposed to be overseeing and act like they're business partners. In the run-up to the Deepwater Horizon disaster, you had the Minerals Management Service. They were all buddy-buddy with the oil platform companies and the oil companies, and they were acting like they were part of that company's public relations arm to keep everybody reassured that everything was just fine. And they almost forgot who they were working for, or who they're supposed to be working for.
Yeah. Well, it's the politicians in Congress. They're instead of, well, actually it's the FDA, somehow they were bought. Yeah, that's what I understand. And we need to have politicians in our Congress that can regulate the FDA, that can enforce laws of the FDA. But it's not going to happen soon.
No,
Mike,
when you have a Congress that for the most part is themselves corrupted, they're going to be ignoring corruption in their underlings unless it proves to be a public embarrassment. Then they'll come down on them like a ton of bricks. But there's very much a nudge, nudge, wink, wink attitude throughout all of Washington, D.C. I won't expose your cheating, and you won't expose mine. Now, occasionally there is an exception, like Bernie Madoff or Bob Menendez. But for the most part, the corruption goes unreported, unremarked, and it's just accepted as business as usual. Anyway, listen, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call.
Thanks, Mike.
We're going to switch over to Murr in Wisconsin. Aloha, Murr. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I think we should rename that Snipe instead of Skype. What do you think?
Well, I got to tell you, ever since this last update, Mike was telling me in the control room that all of the hosts who went with that update, they're all complaining. It's just a huge, huge problem. And Skype doesn't seem to want to do anything about it. I keep checking for an update to deal with the problems. But it worked so much better when it was all peer-to-peer and before Microsoft bought it. And now that Microsoft has it, it's a piece of junk.
Yeah, figures. Yeah, I'll go back to the original reason I wanted to call in was that the synchronicities that were on Friday is very interesting. A friend of Regina's called John Statmiller, and asked if he could have her on. He immediately called Regina, and she could be on. And for some odd reason, Dr. Parker happened to be listening that day. And as you well know, his chloramine, well, it's not his, it's in all our water, and they actually get fined if they don't put it in there. And it's a mixture of chlorine and ammonia, which is deadly.
Yeah, it's highly toxic.
It's in all our tap water. So anyway, he had her on his Sunday show, and she is going to put a paragraph from him about chloramine in her, what do you call it, deposition? No. Referendum.
Yeah, referendum. Okay. All right, listen, Murr, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Murr in Wisconsin. And Murr, we're just finishing up here. You had one more thing you wanted to say, I think.
Yes. Ammonium chloride, the naturally occurring kind, comes from vents in the volcanoes. It's what was used previously to raise bread dough. But it also builds the third spiral in the DNA and fights off radiation. You notice how the Scandinavians don't seem to be too terribly affected by Chernobyl?
Well, I don't have the actual numbers on that particular one. Anyway, Murr, we're going to let you go here. And before I take this last phone call, over the commercial break, I went out to Down Detector, and apparently Skype is having major problems. I'm reading all these complaints here. People are having the same problem we have. Skype will just all of a sudden stop working, or it'll drop the line. People can't make calls. And apparently it began about 8 hours ago. It really peaked. But again, in the good old days before Microsoft, Skype worked really, really well. And it ran peer-to-peer. It was finding its own way through the Internet, which is the way the Internet conceptually works. Microsoft bought it, and they've put it all on the cloud, I guess, so that the government can be listening to everything that we're saying and watching what we're doing on our cameras. But as a result, its performance has really gone downhill. Let's take a phone call. Randy in Indiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Randy, are you there? Randy, there you are.
I'm sorry, what?
I think we had another one of our Skype dropouts. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, the schools are trying to kick my kids out, and they're trying to tell me I need to get vaccines for them.
Yep.
I don't want to, obviously. I just started listening to you guys about a year ago, and all I've heard is bad. So, I mean, what can I do?
Well, it depends on what state.
They said that I can send a letter.
It depends on what state.
I can send a letter refusing it.
Okay, well, depending upon the state that you live in, because the laws are changing from state to state, some states allow a religious exemption. Some states allow an exemption with a note from your doctor, although you may have a hard time convincing your doctor that the vaccines are wrong. Push comes to shove, you may even have to think about relocating and putting your children in a different school. But it is highly abusive. And they're just forcing these medications onto our kids just to make a fast buck, take money away from you. And again, there's little regard for the safety and efficacy of these products. It's like our entire country is being run by the Godfather.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it seems like more and more.
Yep.
And I actually have found their doctor, you know, when our vaccines came up, she said, well, if you want to get them, okay. If you don't, okay. I'm not going to force you to get them. So she will send a letter, but, I mean, should I be worried about them not getting them?
You know, you're going to have to discuss that with your doctor. Anyway, listen, there's the music.
Okay.
We got to head on out now. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller's program. He's got a lot of stuff to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.